Hello and welcome back to Swimming the Strait. I'm your host, Aitana, and this is season 2 of our podcast. This season, we're talking to women who've taken on epic swimming challenges, facing tough waters, pushing their limits, and showing what real grit looks like. It's all about their journeys, the highs, the lows, and what keeps them diving back in. Get ready for stories that will inspire you to face your own challenges with courage and determination. Hello and welcome back to Swimming the Strait podcast. I'm your host, Aitana, and this is the first of a 2-part episode with Corrina Connor. Corrina is a librarian, a cellist, and a marathon swimmer. In this part, she shares the story of her first attempt to swim the Cook Strait in 2021. It was a tough day, cold water, and strong tides made it hard, and she had to stop before reaching the end. We talk about what it's like to face such a challenge and not finish. Corrina speaks openly about the feelings that come with that experience. It's a story about resilience, learning, and the courage to try again. Stay tuned for part 2, where we will continue our conversation and hear more about Corrina's journey. Hello, good morning, Corrina. Thank you very much for joining us today in the show, in Swimming the Strait podcast. Finally, I have been chasing you for the last, I don't know how long, and I'm very, very pleased to have you here.
Thank you very much for having me on. I'm so glad we've managed to work out the international time differences and are now getting to have a chat.
Exactly. It's 8 in the morning here in Spain, and on a Sunday. This morning was so quiet everywhere. Where are you? Please tell us to know where are you?
Well, I am here in Kilbirnie in Wellington, and I realise that the only noise we may have is I'm quite near the airport, so the odd plane might take off. But I just heard one and it seemed to be fine. It wasn't too noisy, so should be good.
I think it will be fine, and it will remind me of my time living in Wellington as well. So that's all good for me. So I would like to chat to you today about your swimming career and life and all the things that we talk on the show. And my first question is always the same: is have you always been a swimmer?
I think I have. I started swimming lessons when I was very small. I did baby swimming, and then I I swam, and I used to swim with my dad sometimes. And I've always liked the sea, playing in the sea. I started with a swim club when I was 10, and that was pretty exciting. I found that it was a sport that I could really get into straight away. I had tried some other things and it hadn't really worked. I didn't have a huge enthusiasm for it, but as soon as I joined the swim club, I really found that was something that I could do, and I enjoyed it, and I loved learning all the new skills. You know, as we learned how to dive and turn and do different turns for different strokes, that seemed really exciting to me. And then when I started going in swim meets, that was pretty thrilling as well. You know, always chasing a new best time. When you're 11, it's very easy to do best times. You basically do them every time you do a swim. And of course, that changes a bit as you get older. But yeah, I found it just a great environment to be in. And yeah, I think then I stopped swimming when I was around 16 because I had other things to do, like getting ready to go to university, and I was doing a lot of music, and that took up a lot of time as well. So yeah, then I didn't really swim from when I was 17, 18 until for more than 12 years. I mean, I had the occasional swim. You know, I was living overseas for a lot of that time, and I wasn't near water. I had the odd swim in a pool just because there was one around, but I wasn't really excited about getting back into it. But when I was living in London, I lived right over the road from a beautiful outdoor pool that's open all year round. It's unheated, so in the winter it gets very cold. In the summer it gets quite warm. And at that point in my sort of exercising life, I had got very into spin classes. I loved them because I was riding my bike quite a bit, and they had some really good spin instructors at the gym, but that was attached to the pool. And I became quite obsessed with spin classes. I went to a lot every week. Sometimes I went to 2 back to back, and that was really good fun. I loved doing that. It was exciting. But then I noticed that at the pool there was a triathlon club, and they would be outside doing their swim sessions while I was at spin. And I suddenly thought, it looks like they're having a pretty good time out there. So maybe I'll just do a session. So I went and asked, and they said, oh yes, you're allowed to do 2 sessions for free, and then decide whether you want to join or not. And I did the first session, and it was pretty tough. I remember thinking, oh, I thought I was fit from doing all that spin, which I was if I was riding a bike, but in the water it's a completely different thing. And I put myself right at the back very sort of conservatively because I wanted to stay out of everyone's way. But then as the hour went on, I gradually was making my way further forward in the group. And then at the end, the coach said, oh, you have quite good technique. You seem to know how to swim. So I thought, yeah, I suppose I do still know how to swim. So then I joined up with them. I never did any of the other triathlon activities, but I used to do all their swim squads sessions, and actually they did some spin sessions as well, which I did too.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then I started, because the pool is open all year round and it gets very cold in the winter, it gets right down to 3 degrees. There was a bunch of people in the triathlon club who swam all year round. And as the temperature got lower and lower, I kept going. And then by the time it was down to sort of 3 degrees, we thought, oh, well, we'll do 100 meters for every degree. So if it's 3, we'll do 300 meters and then get out.
Wow. Okay.
So that was the first winter, and that felt pretty invigorating, and it was fun. So I remember once we were swimming and it was snowing, and that was fantastic. And I think as soon as you're with people doing that sort of activity, you just bond with them, because it seems like such a weird thing to do, but it's so much fun, and then you get to warm up with them afterwards. So that was that year. And then they had some summer races at the pool, and I did quite well in those. There was a half mile and a mile, and I did a 5-kilometer charity swim, which felt terrible. I'd never swum that far all at once, even when I'd been doing proper age group swimming.
Did you say 5?
5 kilometers. Yeah, it was a charity thing.
Yeah, 5 kilometers. 5 kilometers, I find that is a good distance already for swimming.
It is a good distance. Yeah,
yes.
It is a good distance. The second winter, we became a bit more ambitious, and we thought, well, we're going to swim further than 100 meters per degree. And it just sort of, we just kept on going. And I think that was the winter that I moved back here. And my last swim there was the day before I flew back to New Zealand, and it was, I think, about 2 or 3 degrees. And my friend Tawny and I swam about 1,200 meters, and we got very, very cold. But I didn't really want to get out, because it was my last swim there, and I didn't want to leave the pool. But also my hair froze, so it was crunchy. My hair was crunchy. So then I was pretty much back into swimming by then. And then when I moved back to Wellington, I sought out people to swim with. And it took a little while to find the right group that I really fitted in with and felt happy with. But yeah, then I met some of the ocean swimmers. I met Rebecca Hollingsworth, who you've talked to, and Alice and Vicky and some others. And they were really enthusiastic about getting in the sea, and so it just went from there, really. That was 2016, so it was a while back now. But
it's very interesting that you say about the people, because that's how it starts, right? I was relating to your story because it happened something similar to me in Wellington. I just went one day and it was summer and it was a beautiful day, and I got like, oh, do you want to come swimming? And you go swimming, and then suddenly you're in the middle of the winter with 8 degrees water, and you go like, how did I end up here? And it's just because, like you're swimming with people and you're having fun. One of the things that that you said a couple of times is to have fun. And it's, I think it's a big part of not only the training, but also setting goals and, feeling kind of challenging each other to go and say, as you said, like, let's do 100 meters per degree. And then the next year you go like, we're going to go a little bit further. So how do you think that support, like that people help you in your swimming career, which we'll talk about it a little bit, after this question, because I want to just tell the listeners your swimming events that I'm very excited to talk about. So yeah, what is the role of the people around you?
Well, I think one of the main elements for me is to have seen what other people are doing, and just to be amazed by that. I remember when I joined the squad at Kilburney Pool that Timon Wilkinson runs, and Vicky was in that squad, and she was training to swim Lake Taupo, and I just couldn't believe that anyone was going to swim that far, 40 kilometers, and I was totally in awe of her. I mean, I was so much in awe of her that I could hardly even say anything to her, because I thought, well, here is a superhuman who's going to swim 40 kilometers, and she was training so hard. And at that point, I think my goal was mainly to swim maybe 10 to 15 kilometers a week. I thought that's a good amount of swimming. And then I heard that she was training to swim 40 kilometers a week. And I didn't really talk to her about it, but I was just listening to what other people were saying about this magnitude of training. And then she went off and did her swim, and she came back alive. So I thought, well, that's pretty amazing that someone can do that. And then I started, as I started to do more open water events in Wellington. So I did the banana boat around the lighthouse swim, and I did the splash and dash series. And at that point I was, I still didn't know that many of the ocean swimmers, but I could see what they were doing, and I thought what they are doing looks pretty good. Because I love training in the pool. I do really enjoy that, and I like the challenges there, but it's just great to get into the great outdoors, I suppose. And then more and more people were doing more and more amazing things, and then I met Rebecca and Bree and some others, and Bree was training to do the Cook Strait, and she was the first person I knew to do that swim, and she did it and did an amazing job. And then she and Rebecca were training to do their tandem Lake Taupo swim, and I did quite a bit of training with them. But at that point, I didn't really think that I would ever have the capacity to do a swim like that. That still seemed like something for people who were in a completely different league of ability and determination and everything like that. I thought, well, that's not something I'll be able to do, because I still thought that doing 2 kilometers at splash and dash was a pretty big effort.
It is indeed. Sometimes it is.
It is, yes. In the conditions we get in Wellington,
exactly.
Sometimes it is challenging.
Yes.
But the other thing I discovered, which I think has been really useful for me, is that I really love swimming when the conditions are less than comfortable in the sea. And I remember the first time I swam around the lighthouse. Oh, I don't think it was even around the lighthouse. I think I was with some triathletes, and we went in for a New Year's Day swim, and it was really rough. And we went round the first buoy in the fountain. I remember feeling totally overwhelmed by the chop and the wind and the splash and the spray, and thinking, this is rough. But then I kept going in while it was like that. And eventually I thought, well, I'm very comfortable in these conditions. I don't feel anxious about them. And I just love the fact that you just have to hand yourself over to the sea and deal with whatever comes your way. You can't change it. You can't fight against it. You just think, well, this is what we have today, and this is how we're going to swim through it. And my thinking was always that I would just swim exactly the same way that I would in the pool, and just pretend it was the pool and it was flat, but it was actually wild, up and down, flinging you around. So I think that's been very helpful for me, that I really quite love those conditions. I mean, it's fantastic when you swim on a perfectly calm day, but it's just so thrilling to, hand yourself over to nature like that and be flung about in it. So that has been useful.
Yeah, I love that. I think that is a fantastic way to put it, because just a couple of things first. When you talk about the lighthouse, just for the listeners that they don't know about the Wellington Harbour, lighthouse is just a swim that you can, there is a lighthouse, of course, and then we go swimming there and back, and that is around 2.8 kilometers, more or less.
Yeah, 2.7, 2.8.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, and then there are a few buoys that get you to there. So yeah, this is normally the arena where we swim in Wellington. And one of the things that you said that I think I really love, because I relate to that as well, is just swimming in different conditions. Like when I was living in Wellington, I had people asking me, oh, are you looking for the weather forecast tomorrow for the swim? And I was like, well, actually no, because I'm gonna swim regardless. So I will just get there, and depending on the conditions, I will have one swim or another swim. And depending on the conditions, you train different things and you do different things, and you just face it. Because also, if you're going to do an open water swimming event, as we will talk about now, you're going to find any kind of conditions. So you, as you said, I loved what you said about just giving yourself to the conditions and to nature. And I think is one of the beautiful things about open water swimming, which is working with nature and not against it, because you can't fight the ocean, right? You just have to go there and say, okay, I surrender, and I'm going to just go with what I've got in that day. So I think that is such a beautiful way to approach a swim. My next question would be, of course, inspiring by other people is amazing. I felt so inspired as well by you guys when I saw what you do and you did and you are going to do. That it always plants the seed, right, in your brain, going like, well, maybe I can do something similar, or maybe I can set up a goal for me that is similar to what these ladies are doing. So after all these swims that you've done in the pool and training, well, first give me a little bit of your your swimming events that you've done in the last few years since you started swimming again.
Right. So I saw people doing some long swims, and I hadn't done any of those myself. I think my first big swim was in March 2019, and I did the chopper swim, which is up in Auckland, and it was a fundraising swim for the rescue helicopter. And it was from Waikiki Island to Auckland City, pretty much, to Mechanics Bay. And Rebecca did it, and she seemed to have a fantastic time. She had orcas accompanying her, although she didn't see them. And it seemed to me to be a good introduction to that sort of distance,
How
because
far
it's
is
20
that?
kilometers. It's 20 kilometers, pretty much. You do it with a kayaker, and there's also a support boat that's shared between one or two swimmers. And the handy thing is it was all organized. All I had to do was find a kayaker, which turned out to be surprisingly tricky, because the first two who agreed to do it, then they had family things that came up and they couldn't do it. But then just by chance, I found this amazing kayaker called Philip. And I didn't realize, but he was quite a legend in the kayaking world. He was a veteran of the coast to coast and a pretty formidable kayaker. Now, when I went up to, so I did all my training, and I knew that to swim 20 kilometers in a day, you had to swim 20 kilometers a week in preparation. And I knew from eavesdropping on other people who were preparing for swims that you had to be able to do your 20 kilometers pretty quickly. And so you had to train in the pool fast, because you have to swim fast in the sea. You have to start fast and stay fast. So that was what I knew. I wasn't very scientific, but I thought I'll just work on my speed. And I used things like Splash and Dash and the Around the Lighthouse banana boat swim as my markers, I suppose, for tracking my progress. And I found this amazing kayaker, Philip, and it was quite funny, because he was actually very skeptical that anyone would be able to swim 20 kilometers at all. He thought it was a crazy idea. He had just done Ironman, and he found doing the Ironman swim seemed, excessively long. So when he heard I was going to swim 20 kilometers without a wetsuit, he thought, well, this is crazy talk. But he said, well, I'll do it, because he wanted to do something new. And then we met on the morning of the event down on the beach at Matiatia on Waiheke Island. And I gave him my food. I tied my drink bottles onto his kayak, and I said, if you just stay on my left, we'll be fine. Please. And I have to admit, I was fairly naive thinking back for that event. And anyway, we got in and everyone started, and off we went. And he was amazing. He kayaked so perfectly. He was really encouraging the whole way. I have to admit, about 2.5 hours in, I thought, gosh, this is quite a big thing I've decided to do.
Have you swum so far in a row before? Oh, interesting.
No. So, I knew that I was prepared, but I think I was prepared physically, but it's just the magnitude of what you're trying to do. But anyway, I thought, well, I'm just going to keep on swimming. Every time I stopped for a feed break, he just said, oh, you're doing so well. I'm amazed. You're so steady. And he did really nice things, like he counted my stroke rate without me asking him. So he could, each time I stopped, he had some data to give me. And I think that comes from his experience as an endurance multi-sport person. He knows what you need to have told you to keep you going. And then he noticed that if he gave me a sort of 3-minute warning before the feed, I would speed up, because I was excited about the food.
The little things, right?
He was giving me 2-minute warnings, and he noticed that I'd really pick up my pace. So then he thought, oh, I'll give her a 3-minute warning or a 4-minute warning or 5 minutes, just to see. And we rolled along. We saw some other swimmers, and then we didn't really see anyone. And then we passed the Bean Rock Lighthouse, and that's, you're pretty much there then. And so he said, okay, just put your head down and go. And so I did, and then we were finished, and it was amazing. So that was pretty exciting, because I thought, well, I can swim 20 kilometers. I couldn't really believe I'd done it. But
I bet. Yeah. How long did it take you?
It was pretty quick, because the currents there are very friendly. So it wasn't, and the conditions were great. There was a little bit of a swell, which was just fun to play in. I think the last 2 kilometers it was a bit messy because of the chop in the sort of in harbour area. But it only took me, I think, 5.5 hours. 5 hours 38, 5 hours 28.
I love you
Which
guys.
again,
I love you guys, endurance swimmers, when you say it only took me 5 hours, and it's like, goodness gracious.
Well, Philip, he had asked me, he said, what do you want to know? Do you want to know how far it is, how long you've taken? And I said, no, I don't want to know anything. I knew that the Bean Rock lighthouse was, I can't remember, 4 kilometers from the end, possibly less than that. It seemed like less. And I said, oh, well, can you tell me when I've got a kilometer to go so I can, try and push that last kilometer? And that worked. So, and then when I got, when I finished, and when you at that stage finish that event, it finished at a wharf, and you had to climb up a ladder to get out of the sea, which after swimming that much, it was really hard trying to coordinate my arms and legs, but I got up the ladder. And then they said, oh, well, this is the time. And I thought, oh, I've only been swimming for, 5.5 hours. It's good. I was very tired. I was very tired and sore after that. I couldn't believe how sore I was, but yeah.
Just for reference, my first 10K, I swam in 4 hours and a half. It was completely crazy, stupid thing I did. And for me, it was kind of like brutal. Like I couldn't think of anything worse. So yeah, just for reference, you did 20K in 5.5 or 5. It's amazing. It's fantastic. So anyway, I just wanted to give a reference for the listeners.
No, presumably was that current assisted, or was it in a lake, or
it was in a lake? It was in a lake, but I was so underprepared that it was just like it was brutal. Like I have never spent so much time in the water before, so it was just the whole thing was just completely stupid thing to do. But anyway.
Well, that's why we do these things, I suppose.
Exactly. Yes.
You have to learn, and the only way you can really learn is by doing it and having these experiences, which are perhaps suboptimal, but you did it and you finished, so that's what counts.
That's what I was going to ask you as well when I asked you if you have done that distance before, because I think it's totally true what you say, that you have to do it in order to, because when you think about swimming, I mean, you might have swum 20K in the pool in a week, but nothing prepares you to swim 20K in a row until you do it. And then you go like, oh, now I know, as you said, the magnitude of what I'm doing. And then you have a little bit of a reference for future goals. Yeah. So what was exactly next?
So after that, I just continued through that year. I signed up to do the chopper again in 2020. Of course, a couple of days before it was due to happen, it was cancelled because that was when COVID arrived. And here we suddenly realized that everything was going to change. I remember quite optimistically, the organizers said, well, this is an event in the sea and it should be pretty safe. I think we can do it. And everyone said, yeah, it should be pretty safe. I think we can do it. And then, of course, just in that week, that second or third week of March, everything changed, and they just announced, look, we have to cancel because it's not, safe. I had already booked my flights and my accommodation, and there were quite a few people who were in the same boat, metaphorically. So I thought, well, I'll go to Auckland and just see what happens, have a swim. So I remember flying, and it was so weird because there was no one at the airport and everyone was running around looking scared. And I began to think, oh, this is quite serious, what's going to happen here. I got to Auckland Airport and I was on the airport bus, and a whole lot of people got on at the international terminal, and I suddenly thought, oh, they could all have COVID.
Yeah.
Maybe I've done something foolish. So I sort of hurried straight to Waiheke Island with my hand over my mouth, hoping I wouldn't get sick. And I was in contact with some other swimmers, and one of them was the amazing Roger Soulsby of Auckland, of the Fur Seals. And he said, well, look, a bunch of us are doing a swim on, tomorrow, from Parnell round to Ladies Bay, I think, so about 7.5 kilometres, and you're very welcome to join us. So I was on Waiheke Island in my B&B, and then they announced that the borders were closing, and then the next morning I had to be back in town for him to meet me, to take me to this swim. And so I did this. It was an amazing swim. It was so lovely to be welcomed by his group, the Fur Seals, plus some others. And we just had this wonderful current assisted swim around the bays. And the water was so warm, and there was a, huge storm at one point, and there was rain and wind, and then it died down, and it was perfect. And I think that was really one of my last swims before lockdown, because then I came back to Wellington and the pools had shut and the university had shut where I was working at that time. And I think I had about 3 more swims in the sea, and then it was lockdown and we weren't allowed to swim anymore. So that swim in Auckland with Roger and the Fur Seals was very special for that reason.
Yeah. Because
we did get to do something, even though it wasn't what we had planned to do, didn't really work out. And so then time went on. Obviously 2020 was a bit of a weird year.
Yeah.
But what was great is as soon as it was level 3 and we were allowed to swim again, I stopped being a cyclist, which I had been during lockdown, so I could get some exercise and return to the sea. And again, that was a very special time because, of course, we had to be socially distanced, but I swam a lot with Eliza Cummings, who's an amazing American swimmer who's been based in Wellington for a few years. And we went pretty much every day to Wersa Bay, round on the Miramar Peninsula. And I rode my bike and she would arrive in her car. And we just would swim for about 45 minutes in the sea. And we could be socially distanced and very responsible. It was a very safe place to swim. But in those circumstances at the time, again, it felt very, very special because we left, we'd been working at home and everything was, stressful. And we could just have this time in the sea together and swim. And of course, it was pretty chilly because it was getting on for autumn. But it was just a beautiful thing to do, especially around there because it seems so. Have you swum much at Seatoon and Wersa Bay when you were in Wellington?
Yeah. It's a different. Place to swim. Yeah, it's a different feeling. Yes.
Yeah. So we had, we didn't mind about the weather, so we went out in a, screaming southerly gale and a northerly gale and beautiful flat days, and we just went with what was there. Because I think having had those 6 weeks or however long it was when we weren't allowed to swim, you really appreciated it so much more. Just the feeling. It was like being, back enveloped in this wonderful element. Anyway, that was a digression. Rebecca had this brilliant idea, which I thought was also a pretty good idea, that because there were no international people coming here to swim the Cook Strait, that it would be a really good opportunity to swim the Cook Strait.
Of course, as you do.
And if we did it together, we would save ourselves some money. And so we approached Philip Rush and said, is this a goer? And he said, okay, you can do it. It will be tricky. You have to be able to swim at this speed. You have to stay together the whole time and you have to train for that. So we got into gear. Oh, sorry.
No, I just wanted to explain to the listeners that we've talked about Cook Strait in the show a few times, but Cook Strait is just the body of water that joins or separates the North Island from the South Island in New Zealand, and swim in pairs. Just because we've been talking about Cook Strait swimming solo, but when you go in pairs, as you say, you have to go the same speed, and because you have one boat that is assisting you both, so you guys have to keep together in order to be safe, and for both and for the crew, and in order to be able to complete the swim together, and not, if you separate it too much, then it will not be safe for either. Just a little for people to understand. What were you guys going to do?
Well, we did a lot of training together, and Rebecca was much more experienced than me because she had already done Taupo, and she had done the SCAR swim event in Arizona and some others, Rock Nest Island. So, so she knew more what was involved. Again, I was quite naive, but I just thought, well, I just have to be able to swim fast and keep up. And we did a lot of swims together, and we got very good at swimming next to each other, very close, without hitting each other or bumping into each other. And we practiced pretending that we were both swimming next to the IRB, so we could cope whether it was on our left or on our right. And we worked pretty hard. Luckily, Rebecca was very good at organising and motivating and what have you. And we were scheduled to swim in early February 2021. But naturally, that first date got blown out by the weather.
Of course.
And we waited all the way through February and into March, and the wind just blew and blew and blew and blew.
Yeah, that's a long
wait. And then finally, it looked like there was going to be a possible window around 20th, 21st of March, I think. I've forgotten what day we did it on now. That's terrible. March, around that time in March. And so off we went. And I had all my food ready, and we set off. I think it would be safe to say that things didn't really go as planned right from the beginning. At the start, I took off a bit fast. Rebecca takes a bit longer to get into the swing of things, to warm herself up. But at the beginning also, we had wonderful conditions. We had a really nice swell, and I was really loving swimming on that swell, because immediately you just had this feeling of being in this enormous body of water that was so much stronger than anything else I had ever been in. It felt like the swell was coming up from the center of the earth underneath us. After a while, we got together and we were swimming together, and we swam together for a long way. We had some dolphins come to visit, and that again is probably, I think the visit from the dolphins is most likely to be the most special thing that's ever happened to me in my life, because we were swimming and then suddenly there were dolphins under us and beside us and looking at us, and you just can't believe it when these creatures come to see you. It's like magic.
Magic indeed. Yeah
It really was magical. And we kept on swimming and swimming. I think there were lots of points while we were swimming where I didn't really feel comfortable. I think I felt a bit overwhelmed by all the conditions around us. Just the whole thing was quite, it's quite a lot to take in. But I thought, well, we're doing well. Now, what we didn't know, and I can't remember if you talked about this with Rebecca when she talked to you, what we didn't know is that having made a very fast start, we did 7 kilometers in the first hour. Wow. We then hit the tide change, and we got stuck while it was waiting to change for apparently over an hour. Now, we didn't know this, of course, because we were just swimming, and I have no recollection of it being tougher or more choppy, or we were just swimming. Then we got through the tide change, and a new tide came along, and it started whizzing us north at a very good clip. But unfortunately, we were sort of going parallel with the South Island. We weren't really heading toward it. And I remember being quite disorientated because I could still see the wind farm back at Makara, and it looked very close. But by the same token, I could see the South Island, and it looked pretty close. And we kept swimming and swimming and swimming. Then I remember looking up and thinking, oh, I know I've got that wrong. I remember we had a pause, and I remember Phil yelled at me that if I didn't start swimming next to the IRB, he was going to pull me out.
Okay.
And I thought, what on earth is he talking about? I'm swimming so well. I don't like that. And so then we set off again. And I thought, no, I'm going to show him how well I can swim. And I remember Rebecca was kind of there. It was very splashy. I remember there was a lot of splash. And then he stopped and he yelled at me again. And I thought, well, this really isn't fair. This is not fair. And then I remember I looked up and I saw these two big islands. And I thought, gosh, those must be the brothers.
Oh my God.
I don't think we're
Okay.
supposed to be anywhere near those. And then I put my head down and swam a bit more. And then suddenly this thing in my head just said, you need to get out now. You have to stop. And it was a very powerful, it wasn't like, oh, I just can't be bothered anymore. It was as if a bell was ringing in my head saying, get out of the sea now. So I just swam over to the IRB and said, I have to stop. Now, I understood at that point that, well, what I believe happened is that they must have pulled me into the IRB. And the next thing I knew, I was waking up on the big boat, or rather John, who was in our crew, was waking me up and was quite insistent that I had to wake up and stay awake.
Wow.
I was very insistent that I did not want to be awake. I wanted to be sound asleep. And I couldn't work out why I had so many blankets over me, because they were weighing me down and it was very uncomfortable and I didn't like it. And he was saying, no, you must wake up. And he was shaking me and holding my hand and shaking me. And Tracy, who's a lovely person, who's a good friend of Rebecca, was also there saying, come on, wake up. And was, and then I became aware that obviously something bad had happened, but I didn't really know what. So, and then I was very cold. I knew I was very cold. And then I started shivering. And these were such big shivers. I had never felt anything like it before. I mean, they started right at the top of my head and just worked down to my feet. And it was very painful. And I remember holding onto John's hand very tightly and sort of whimpering that it hurt. And then something else happened. And then I became aware that actually Rebecca had just finished the swim. She had reached the South Island.
Okay.
And she was coming back on the boat. So that was great. And I remember thinking, oh, I must get up and hug her. And I think I managed to get into a sitting position and then just sort of fell over again. And just when she was in the boat, I was just kind of patting her on the arm and saying, oh, well done. So anyway, as it turned out, well, actually, after that point, I think with hypothermia, it's funny because you're very, very cold and then suddenly you're just fine again. And, because you've warmed yourself up. And then you think, well, what on earth happened? And I was quite warm and I just went and sat out on the back of the boat and drank water and we sailed back to Mana. Now, what I didn't know, and Rebecca filled me in on all this later, is in fact there were about 3 hours of swimming that I have no recollection of at all, 2 to 3 hours.
Wow.
And a whole lot of stuff happened that I can't remember. I mean, I can't remember when it was getting dark and Phil and Corey were clipping lights onto our togs and onto our goggle straps. And I also didn't know that after I said I had to stop, I just assumed that they pulled me into the IRB, but they couldn't. They told me to swim over to the back of the big boat and get on that. And I just kept going off in the wrong direction because I really didn't know what was going on. Because I had all these bruises, my body was covered in big bruises, and I remember thinking, how on earth did I get these? They were on my stomach and on my legs and on my arms, and those were bruises from poor Tracy and John trying to pull me up over the back of the boat and into it. So, and all of that I still have no recollection of. So that was quite I wouldn't say it was a traumatic experience, but it was definitely difficult to deal with, because there was just so much that I couldn't remember. And some of what I could remember, I was quite embarrassed by. So it was, and also I felt just terrible, because I thought, well, I could have ruined, well, I almost did ruin Rebecca's swim. And we had agreed beforehand that whatever happened, if one of us had to be pulled out, that was fine. The other person would just keep on going. And that's how we would do it. So that's how it happened. I mean, it didn't happen in a great way. And I slowed her down a lot, which I still feel very bad about, actually, because she had to deal with this lunatic beside her in the sea who was doing goodness knows what. So it took, and it took a while to recover from that in my head. Not my body so much. I remember I woke up the next day and I wasn't even tired. I sort of felt weird, but I felt jet lagged. I think I felt jet lagged for a few days, but not tired. It was funny. So then I thought, well, that probably means that I am not cut out for this sort of activity, because that was a fairly epic disaster on many levels. But of course, there were still things about it that were amazing, like seeing the dolphins and just experiencing the water, because that water is so blue and so beautiful. So there were lots of good things to hold on to, but of course, it's hard to, it's hard for your memory not to be dominated by what was bad, I suppose.
So why do you think that happened?
Well, I think from reading more about this sort of stuff afterwards, and from talking to Phil as well, and reading some other people's blogs, I think what happened is that I didn't have enough fuel. I was under fueled. I mean, I had planned my feeds quite carefully, but for whatever reason, it just wasn't enough to deal with the conditions. And so I was underfueled, I was underpowered, and I got cold because I didn't have enough fuel to keep, to expend that much energy and keep me warm. So I basically just ran out of steam. That was what it was, and then got cold. Apparently in the IRB, they were pretty sure that I was going a little bit funny, but I seemed to be able to deal with stuff. So they thought, well, they'd just keep me going.
Okay.
And until I couldn't go any further. So, and apparently it was a good thing that I decided when I had enough and got out. So, so I thought, well, that's that for me. I'm obviously not cut out for that. But amazing, about a month later, pretty much exactly a month later. Yeah, we did swim on the 25th of March, because a month later was the 25th of April, and it was Anzac Day, that's right. And I was at squad at Freiburg, and Philip said, well, we can't leave it like that, because I think you can, that wasn't how you should have done that, and it went wrong, but we can fix it and we can do it again.
Thank you for listening to Swimming the Strait. We hope these stories of incredible women have inspired you. If you have any suggestions or questions, send us an email at hello@aitanaforcen.com. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. Until next time, keep swimming. I'm Aitana, and this has been Swimming the Strait.